stranger things have happened, but that's definitely on there. All right, guys, we're going to give you guys a couple minutes. I'm just finishing up some last minute setup here for the show tonight. Lots and lots of questions that came in this week. So I am always excited when I have lots of questions to answer this week. All right, I see a couple people jumping on board. I am broadcasting tonight both to my YouTube channel, Cozy Talks, and also my Facebook channel. So any of you prefer watching from YouTube, go ahead and find me on the YouTube channel. And also, if you have any friends or people who would like to be able to watch the show, but they don't necessarily have a Facebook account or they're not comfortable around Facebook, you can always kind of direct them to my YouTube channel. We got our first couple of people. We got Eric on board. Benny had a recent birthday. Happy birthday, Benny. Thanks for joining us. Feliz cumpleaños. All right, guys, don't be shy. There's Mark. I knew you were there, Mark, waiting for me. Hey, Connie, good to see you. Diana, we got Diana Baker on board. Doug West, let's go Chiefs. William Mays in Richmond, Virginia. Guys, we haven't done a what's in your mug recently. I was realizing this. Steven, man, you got that question in at the last second, buddy, and I'm going to answer it tonight. Susan, and Bonnie's here. Doug Campbell, I got both my Dougs here. Cold in Alberta, negative 20 degrees Celsius. Oh my gosh, I hope you have hot tea in your mug, Doug. Damon, what's going on, man? Hey, I'm changing it up tonight, Damon. I'm drinking a little bit of more your style this evening. So I don't drink very often, but every once in a while I'll treat myself. And I got a little Spanish sherry here. This is a kind of a classic common sherry that they drink in Spain. So having a little bit of it to myself this evening. Tom, I have your input here as well, your information for tonight. So thank you for sending that to me. We got Jody. You invited numerous people. Jody, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. And I hope you're feeling better. I know you had quite a run with it a couple weeks back. We've got Colin from Phillipsburg, Kansas, and there's Ashley. Ashley, if it's snowy there, are you still drinking your iced tea, girl? We got Johnny V from Poughkeepsie, New York. What's going on? Johnny's getting ready to have his adventure in skiing, and I cannot wait to see pictures of that. So cheers, everybody. Guys, what's in your mug? We got Merlot. Nice, Damon. Very nice. Hey, Rhonda, glad you could join us. Guys, I like to know, I'm very interactive with my audience, and I love to hear from you guys. So for those of you who are newcomers tonight, part of your hazing ritual for being on the Cozy Talk show is you got to let me know not only who you are, but where you're from and what's in your mug or your glass for this evening. Let's see, Diane, enjoying my water while in the CRPS flare. I'm glad you could join us this evening, Diane. We got Patrick Jules on board. Let's see who else we got. Jim here from St. Louis with a fine Merlot. Lots of Merlot here this evening. Maybe I should have switched to that. We've got Sandy from Alaska, 24 degrees. Oh my gosh, people. Patrick has chicken soup. There you go. Ashley, middle of school week, but I got lots of Mick Ultra. There you go. There you go. And we got Barbara Schweitzer with her green tea. Cheers to you. Brett Sykes with his Mountain Dew. Eric with his Barks root beer. We got Diet Coke. That's my style too, Stephen. We got Mark hitting the tequila tonight. Oh boy. So Mark, maybe your responses will be just as interesting as mine after I've had a couple of sips of this. We've had Bonnie's with her coffee with a high of 30. Ouch. We got the other Mark here from Muskego, Wisconsin, drinking water, and Connie Morris, sweet tea in Georgia. Guys, thank you so much for joining me this evening. We've got a really nice crew on board already. Glenda with her hot cocoa, and it's 80 degrees here in Florida, so I had to kind of forego my hot cocoa. Sorry to my folks up there in Alaska for saying that. Jody says, got my new prosthetic with All Pro Foot. Loving it. Awesome. Pat has 7 inches of fresh snow from upstate New York. That was to say, Pat, I know you're rocking the IPA. Sandra with her Pepsi. All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started. We got a nice full house tonight, and that's how I like it. We've got Kay from Alaska. Cheers with water. All right, Kay, well, let's just slide by tonight. And we got Chris from Iowa and Steven 20 miles south of Boston. All right, guys, so I'm like happy as a lark because I have tons of questions from you guys this week. And I always love it when you guys send me questions. That's what this show is about. Send me questions, and if I don't know the answer, I will go looking for the answer and find the right person who can help us out. Yeah, I know, Kay, 80 degrees. It's crazy. Like Florida is completely bipolar in the wintertime. One day it'll be 40 degrees. The next day it'll be 80. The next day we'll be in the 30s. It's nuts. All right. And guys, I am broadcasting to my YouTube channel as well. I've been able to kind of successfully more or less maneuver this software that allows me to stream simultaneously. So once again, if any of you have folks who are not real savvy on Facebook and really just don't like the whole social media side of things, they can follow me through YouTube. Hey, Jeff, speaking of YouTube, watching somebody from YouTube. New sockets yesterday. Jeff got some new sockets, standing on one for 15 minutes and switched to the other side. Was easier than ever before. Awesome, Jeff. All right, guys. So for those of you joining me for the first time, let me give my little special introduction. My name is Kosi Bayoso. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT going on 18 years now. I've worked pretty much in every setting imaginable, been there, done that, need to get a t-shirt for it. And my passion is obviously working with the limb loss community. I have a clinic here in Tampa that is exclusively for working with amputees, and obviously this show, bringing it to you. So tonight, we got a lot of stuff here, guys. We got a lot of stuff to go through. First, let's start off with one of the questions from Glenda. I think Glenda's here tonight, actually. Hey, Karen. All right, so Glenda asks, I had my socket get stuck on my leg this week and had trouble getting it off. I have elevated vacuum, no pin lock. Guys, Kosi poll, how many of y'all, no shame, no judging, how many of y'all have had your leg get stuck on you? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. This happens. Don't be shy, guys. Don't be shy. This happens a lot more than you think. It's something that, especially those of you who have pin lock systems and you just get to the pin lock just in the wrong way, or if you're wearing the elevated vacuum and a little too aggressive with that vacuum and boom, that leg is staying on and not coming off. So I've had one or two patients in the past that this happened to, and I'd like to kind of go over it. So Glenda, in your case, you have the elevated vacuum and not the pin lock. So Stephen says, never. Kay says, yep. Jim says, nope. Karen says, nope. Brett says, don't have a prosthesis yet. All right. Gage says, yes, I was dumb and put my liner on without socks. It got stuck. Oh, dear. And guys, this happens, especially for those of you who are just learning how to maneuver the prosthesis, and sometimes getting the darn thing on is so difficult that you're so proud that you got it on, and then you realized, oh, geez, now I can't get it off. Okay. So a couple of tricks that we try to do here. Number one, a little water in the liner. And guys, not like pouring a whole gallon of water, but if you can kind of peel back your liner just a little bit and pour some water in there, dribble some water and let it get in there, that helps break the seal a lot of times. And usually that does the trick when you're having a really tough time with it, okay? If you have an elevated vacuum, like Glenda does, okay? I was actually talking to one of my prosthetists today, and he was just saying, you can pull out the little part of the vacuum and vacuum is done, okay? That being said, make sure you ask your prosthetist how to do that so that you don't go accidentally pulling the wrong way or the wrong thing or too much. Each of these little elevated vacuum systems look a little bit different. So just ask your prosthetist, in the event that my leg gets stuck on me and I have to just manually remove the vacuum hose, the little hose on the outside, how do I do that without breaking my system, right? Something to always run by the prosthetist. And those of you who have pin locks, and this is probably the most common culprit when it comes to leg being stuck on patient, okay? Your socks, okay? So those of you who have pin lock, right, and you're wearing socks, the socks has a little hole in the bottom so that you can stick the pin through the hole, okay? If you don't pull that sock up tight enough, it'll get caught in the little, how would you call it? The little part of the screw on the pin lock. So then when you put it into the pin lock, the cloth gets caught in there. Does that make sense? And that can be a bit of a doozy. Once again, if that happens to you, okay, little water in the liner helps kind of get things off. Everything will kind of come off all at the same time, but at least you can get it off. True story, guys. Yes, Kay, between the liner and the leg, okay? So between the liner and the leg, if you pour a little bit of water, it'll kind of release a little bit of that suction, and that might be just enough what you need to kind of just like pry it off. And guys, it's happened to me in the clinic, not my patient getting stuck in their socket, but where we had a tough time getting the socket off because we did such a good job of putting it on. Okay. And sometimes it's involved, especially if my patients have a little bit of weakness in their hands, it's involved my patient, pushing down on their socket and me pulling just to get it off. It happens. Okay. So run this by your prosthetist, run the situation and say, what if my leg gets stuck. How do you recommend that I take it off? Okay. True story. Had a patient, lovely man. And guys, whenever I have a patient come into my clinic, they have my phone number. They have my personal cell phone number, and they know that they can call me anytime. Well, the poor guy, he had his leg on him. It got stuck on Friday, and he spent the whole weekend, and he didn't come to see me until Monday. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, why didn't you call me? And he said, I didn't want to bother you. And I'm like, you're supposed to call me if anything like this happens, or you're a prosthetist. So it was just one of those moments where I was just like, guys, if something like that happens, and it's not the first time I've heard that happen, where the person has a serious problem and they wait the weekend because they don't want to bother their clinician. That's what we're here for, guys. So just one of those things that I'm like, you know what? I'm glad Glenda asked that question, because I don't think I've ever addressed that here. All right, let's see what you guys got to say about it. Damon said, once it was all it took and I learned my lesson. Right, Damon? I tell you, my patients who get stuck with their pin lock in their sock, it only takes one time, and then they realize, oh, that's what Kosi was talking about, that we have to really make sure to pull that sock up tight. Yeah, Karen says, I have a suction leg. Eric says, not yet. Hopefully not ever. Diane says, no prosthesis yet. Yep, Johnny, happens when your sock gets stuck in the pin unknowingly. Jamie says, not I so far. Hey, Frank, what's going on, man? Compadre, good to see you, man. All right. And then we got, let's see, trying to get all these. Harsh says it's happened to him in the grooves. Thank you. Where the sock gets stuck in the grooves of the little pin. Ashley says, I have a suction socket and kept losing suction. Culprit, lint from the sock in the hole. There you go. That happened. Okay. Yeah. So Harsh says it happened. He went to Hanger, his prosthetist, and they applied some spray. Okay. So guys, it happens. It happens. Let's see. Steven says, most of my socks have holes. We have big moths. That's good. Okay. Let's see. Juneberg is on. Gary wore his modern day pirate shirt. First time I met him, never had one since. Hey, Lena, glad you could join me, girl. All right, guys. So that's the pin lock question. This next one, and guys, for all my newcomers, cheers. Cheers. Let's see what happens. The more I drink of this, how much more interesting and creative my responses get. We'll see. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Our next one comes from Tom. Tom is a wonderful person who's been watching the show lately, and he's been emailing me a lot of his thoughts on things. And I really value his input. And also, whenever you guys have a hack, or whenever you guys have insight on what works for you on a certain problem, love to hear about it. So here's what Tom has to say. He says, I'm a peer visitor here in Ontario, Canada, and love helping amputees who are struggling. One question that always comes up is, what is my prosthesis supposed to feel like when I wear it? It feels too loose or too tight. My best description I tell others is, the nice snug feeling you have when you roll the liner on? That's what your socket should feel like. And then he goes on to say, he wears, I believe it's an Ice Raw seal-in liner with suction suspension system. Okay, and I know many of you have a similar setup. He says, my stump measures for size 25, but the size 22 feels better for me. And when I became an amputee, I had no one to help me out, and that's why I became a peer visitor, and it helps me too. And guys, there are many of you out there who are in that phase where you've become more independent with your prosthesis. You're kind of starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel with your recovery process. And I know I have couple of patients in particular who are in that phase right now, and they're just kind of looking around and saying, okay, now what can I do? What can I do? And for me, Peer Visitor is just such a beautiful program. I know it's done through the Amputee Coalition. They provide training, and that's something that with COVID, I'm not sure how they're handling that, folks. But for those of you who are interested in how you can give back and be that support for the new amputee, I highly encourage you to look at the Peer Visitor program. And what Tom has to say about the liner is true. And this is something that I've learned also just with experience is you'll have your measurements, right, for the liners. And like Tom, he measured for a size 25, but the size 22 just happened to fit a little bit better. And that kind of, oh, hey, what's up, Captain? You're live. All right. We got Captain on board. All right. And guys, a lot of what feels right for you comes with experience. Okay. So that's one of the things to consider. And as far as how the socket should fit, Tom hit the nail on the head. It should feel snug and comfortable. It's a Goldilocks situation. Not too tight, not too loose, just right. Okay. And the thing is, hopefully, if you have a good prosthetist and a good physical therapist working with you, they can help you figure out what it's supposed to feel like when it fits properly. Okay. And we've done this kind of talk before in terms of, especially when it comes to managing the socks. When you're first an amputee, learning how many socks to put on, how many socks to take off. Okay. And I do that a lot with my patients when I get the just right fit where I can see that their alignment is correct. They're everywhere they need to be in that socket. Their skin's looking good. And I ask them, are they comfortable? When they tell me yes, I tell them, take a snapshot of that feeling. Okay. Lock in that feeling of comfort because that's what you should strive for every time you put on your socket. And if you're not comfortable, okay, then you need to go back and see why. Is it an issue of socks? Is it a matter of your liner not fitting properly? Is it something that you need to bring to your prosthetist to see if they can diagnose the problem? Okay. So this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Your socket should be comfortable, no pain. Yes. So Tom, thank you so much for that particular input. And I've got some more comments coming in, so I want to see what you guys are saying. All right, let's see. Gage says, I have a suspended socket. I'm kind of lucky because I still have my kneecap, which helps hold it on. Yep. Leanne, oh, so good to see you on here, Leanne. Okay, and then let's see. Daniel says, I measured a 28 and use a 25 liner with the seal-in liners as well. And guys, it all varies a little different. It's kind of the same way just with clothing in general. If you think about it, you know, you might measure for one size, but one particular piece of clothing might fit better for you in a different size. And sometimes it's just trial and error. And sometimes I've seen patients who are a bit shy about saying this to their prosthetist because obviously you don't want to contradict your clinician and be rude. But it is well within your right to say, hey, you know, this liner, it's feeling too loose. Like I don't feel like I'm really supported in this liner. Can we try the smaller size? Okay. And just see how it feels. And then the opposite is true. If you feel like you're being strangled by your liner, okay, then that's not going to be good either because that's going to start setting off some issues. It could set off a phantom pain. It could set off numbness in the residual limb, and you might need to go up a size. Okay. Hey, Larry, good to see. Oh my gosh, Larry, I haven't seen you in a long time, man. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, what else we got? We got Glenn says the training is on pause right now. So, but guys, those of you who are interested in becoming peer visitors, just keep checking back. So hopefully they'll open up that program at some point. How many peer visitors do I have here this evening? I know I've got Tom. Mark says me. Who are my Amputee Coalition peer visitors? If y'all don't mind like digitally raising your hand in the comment section. Let's see. Daniel says, I find that I use the size liner I measured for in the seal-in liners. They tend to get air in the liner and they're a little uncomfortable. And again, liners is just like everything else, guys. You got to try more than one before you find. Right. So Steven says measurements don't always work. They measure at the bottom of the stump and I have very muscular thighs, need a looser liner. So again, guys, the measurements, the textbook measurements is a starting point. Okay. I know that there's some prosthetists out there that I've worked with that they measure the patient for a particular liner and they get that size, the size above and the size below, which kind of makes sense just to see what works best. Johnny says, my residual limb matured. My gel liner needed to get smaller since my residual limb circumference got smaller. Absolutely. Brett says, my shrinker sock irritates my skin. Am I doing something wrong? Okay, so Brett, if your shrinker sock is irritating your skin, there could be a couple of things with this. And actually, this is going to lead into the next question about shrinkers that somebody posted. Shrinkers, guys, here, I'll just kind of troubleshoot with Brett here. Sometimes because the shrinker will have like a texture to it, it's kind of like a little bit of a ribbed texture that can sometimes irritate people who have very sensitive skin. If that's the case, Brett, perhaps wearing a sheath liner and then putting the shrinker on might reduce that irritation. And guys, the sheath liner, it's sometimes also called the half ply. It's made out of, it feels like pantyhose material, okay? And it's a very, very, very thin sock. And we use it, you know, to put on socks to help with patients manage their sock volume. But Brett, if your irritation is being caused because of the texture of the shrinker and the fact that it's causing friction there, maybe putting on a half ply sheath and then putting the shrinker on top might help with that. Another thing I find about shrinkers with some of my folks is they forget that they have to wash the shrinkers, okay? Because a lot of times people put their shrinkers on at night after they've had a shower or a bath and they have clean skin. So they don't think about washing it the same way they have to wash their liners and their socks on a daily basis. So if the shrinker hasn't been washed, there could be some dust and particles and things in there that could, and just dead skin also, that could be irritating the skin. The other thing, Brett, is the fit. You know, shrinkers are a lot like liners. They have to fit just right. If it's too tight, yeah, you're going to run into some problems and some irritation there on the skin. If it's too loose, then it's not going to do a single darn thing. And if it's too loose, Brett, here's another thing for you to think about. That could be what's causing the friction because it's rubbing up and down on your skin if it's too loose. Make sense? And that kind of segues nicely into this question. Hang on with me. Stay with me for a second. Steven's question. Had it here somewhere. Here we go. Steven's question that he got in just at the last minute. So Steven asks, what are your thoughts on how long I should wear a shrinker socks? I am 18 months out of a right above the knee amputation. I stopped wearing them after 6 months. My stump seemed consistent in size. Okay. So here are my thoughts on shrinkers. I love shrinkers. Okay. Way back in the olden days when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I first became a therapist, we really didn't have shrinkers. We had to manually wrap a patient's limb after surgery with the ACE wrap and this fancy wrapping technique. And within like an hour, the ACE wrap would fall off. Okay. So it was a real pain in the neck. So when these shrinkers came out on the market and they were doling them out like candy, we were thrilled because it was just a really fantastic way to help put compression onto that residual limb and help reduce that inflammation. Okay. And it's a really great tool because the more you can reduce that inflammation, the better the patient's going to move around, the less pain they will have, right? Less inflammation pushing down on all those nerves and all those soft tissues that are trying to heal. Okay. So how long should you use a shrinker? Okay. So for a person who's fresh out of their amputation, I tell them once the surgeon gives you that shrinker, wear the shrinker 23 out of 24 hours a day. Use the 1 hour for hygiene and for bathing purposes. Okay. To get that constant compression in. After you start wearing a prosthesis, right, and you start getting back onto your feet again and walking around, wear the shrinker whenever you're not wearing the prosthesis. Okay, so for those of you who are starting out with the prosthesis wearing schedule, you may only be wearing your prosthesis 2, 3, maybe 4 hours a day, and you're building up from there, right? So all the rest of the time, keep the shrinker on. Why? Because it's still giving you that compression. It's still helping to mold that residual limb. Okay. Now, those of you who are well out of your amputation and you're noticing that your residual limb has matured, that it has reached a steady state, okay, meaning it's not fluctuating in volume a lot, then you might be able to forego wearing a shrinker. But here's what I think about that. Okay. At nighttime, when you're taking your prosthesis off, okay, your limb is going to probably expand just a little bit. That's a very normal thing, especially if you were hitting the salt and vinegar potato chips like I like to do at nighttime, right? And then in the morning when you wake up, it might be a little more difficult to get your residual limb into the socket. This is where the shrinker can still be a valuable tool, okay? So Stephen, if you find that you wake up in the morning and you're able to put your leg on, not a problem, no issues, not tight or anything like that, then consider yourself to be one of the lucky ones, okay? But more often than not, most of my patients do notice a difference and they find it to be a little less frustrating when they wear the shrinker at night and they can slip into their prosthesis a lot easier in the morning. The other side of that is I have a lot of patients that if they have, especially if they have a lot of extra soft tissue on their residual limb, it just feels more comfortable at night because it just gives that compression to that soft tissue. Okay. Last caveat on this one. Okay. So let's say, Stephen, you're one of the lucky ones. You don't need to wear a shrinker at night. Your limb stays perfectly the same throughout the night and you're good. Keep a shrinker around. Okay. And mind you, keep a shrinker that still has stretch to it, not a stretched out one. Keep one fresh for when you go traveling. Obviously right now we've got a lot of travel restrictions going on, but eventually, hopefully, God willing, we'll be able to start traveling normally as a society again. And when we go up in airplanes or even a long car trip, that's when people also can have some swelling in their residual limb. Okay. So I always tell people, take that shrinker, tuck it away, put it into your suitcase just in case you do experience swelling when you're on the airplane when you get out, you can put the shrinker on and get that down. Or, y'all know I got to take it off on tangents here. Or while you're on the airplane, if you choose to remove your prosthesis, put the shrinker on to prevent the swelling from happening. Yes, thumbs up. Can I get thumbs up? All right, let's see. Lots of comments coming in. Okay, Daniel says, if I don't use a shrinker, I tend to have nerve pain. It's definitely worse the more active I am in the day. And again, oh, Stephen says, thanks for your answer. I send a bottle of Merlot. I'll take that. I'll take that, Stephen. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So Daniel says it works to help with the nerve pain. And again, these shrinkers, it's that compression side of things. And shrinkers, I believe there was another question about when to replace the shrinker. And I kind of tell people when it's too easy to put on. Okay. If it doesn't take you a little bit of a struggle to get the shrinker on, that means it's too loose and it's time to ask your prosthetist for another one. Same thing with the liners. If it doesn't take a little bit of elbow grease to get that liner on, chances are it might start being a little bit stretched out and you might have to ask your prosthetist for another one. Harsh says, always best on overseas trips. Absolutely. Hey, Kevin. Let's see. Jim asks, is there any recommended use for outworn or used shrinkers and liners? Not that I know of. I know some of my patients, Jim, will tend to keep some of them as just extra, as an emergency for one of those you never know when you might need one and something else happened kind of things. And but I just recommend, if it's a liner, especially put it into a plastic bag so it can stay airtight so you don't get lint on it. Let's see. Jeff coming in late from Iowa. Glad you could join us, Jeff. All right. Next. Here's a good one. Sarah sent me a question saying, oh, wait, actually, now that we're on the subject of liners, let's finish up the little topic on liners. Last week, we did have a question about a gentleman who was having some irritation on his knee from the prosthesis. Okay, so there was a few things that we talked about on how he could manage that. And then Mark chimed in and said that there's actually some liners out there that will have a little bit thicker lining on the front compared to behind the knee. And that can also help give a little bit of an extra cushion. Ooh, Ashley, that is awesome. Ashley says, I have an old liner in the freezer I use on days when my residual limb is super sore. Ashley, that is brilliant. I love that idea. I am so stealing that. Actually, that's really good. And you can do the same thing with the shrinker. Actually, now that I think about it, you can throw that into the freezer and it'll be a nice little cool off for an old shrinker. Brilliant. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Charles says, I dramatically change in size from morning to evening while wearing my below the knee prosthesis since I changed from a pin in socket to an elevated vacuum. I let my vacuum to adjust through my daily wearing routine. All right, guys. So Sarah asks, do you have any ideas on walking as a double below the knee amputee without using your back muscles to compensate? Okay. And guys, I like this question. This is obviously bread and butter for physical therapists here. So as a bilateral below the knee amputee, okay, obviously a lot of challenges associated because you're talking about both limbs being amputated, extra energy that's being used to walk, okay? But you still have both of your knees, okay? So when I see a bilateral below the knee amputee, I've seen some who have beautiful gait patterns, very natural looking gait patterns. Two people that come to mind is my buddy Reggie Showers and my other girl Haven Shepherd. They are both bilateral below the knee amputees. And when they're wearing long pants, people don't realize that they're amputees. They have beautiful, smooth gait patterns, okay? Having both of those knees really gives a little bit more of an advantage there compared to someone who would say, for example, be a bilateral above the knee, okay? So when it comes to compensations as a PT, I definitely try to prevent as many of those as I possibly can. Now, on the flip side, for folks who are bilateral above the knee amputees, since they're missing both their knees and their ankles, there is a little bit of compensation movement going on just to be able to propel forward. But even in those cases, we try to minimize those compensations as much as we can so that we don't cause injuries in other joints, okay? So obviously, back takes a beating. The back takes a beating when you're an amputee, whether it's single or bilateral. And it all keeps coming back to the foundational things that I say a lot on the show. okay? Strengthening. Specifically for amputees, strengthening of the glutes and strengthening of the core. And you guys have heard me say this a million times on the show. Say it with me now. It's all about the butt, okay? Strengthening those muscles in the derriere, in the bahukas, in whatever you want to call it, is absolutely essential to helping you power that gait, helping you have a stable foundation, and hopefully preventing some of these compensations, okay? But with the gluteal muscles, you got to get the core to work with you, okay? Everything working together. So we're going to do this tonight. I'm going to try to demonstrate as best as I can. And I was actually on a telehealth consult today, and I was actually teaching some of these exercises to my patient on telehealth, okay? So everybody kind of, if you're in a good position right now, I'm going to show you how to do this particular exercise, okay? Get yourself seated, right? And try to really make sure that you're even on your bottom. You've got even weight, that you're not, listed over to one side or favoring one side. If you're wearing a socket that's kind of bumping up on you when you're sitting down, go ahead and push the socket off a little bit so that you can be even on both sides, okay? This exercise that we're going to do tonight, guys, is a really simple foundational exercise for building the transverse abdominal muscle, okay? And that's the corset muscle. Poor Bob here doesn't have one, but we're trying to demonstrate on here. Basically, you've got your rectus abdominis, right? It's that nice long one that goes here that everybody sees the six-pack and everybody wants the six-pack. Then you've got your obliques, internal and external obliques. And then at the very deep core, you have a transverse abdominis, and it runs sideways like this. And it acts like a corset. It looks like a corset muscle, and it acts like a corset muscle. That's the muscle we really, really, really want to target when we're working core. Because if you can activate that transverse abdominis, think about it, you're really pulling everything in and giving support there. How do you do that? It's a little bit trickier to isolate it because usually the rectus abdominis wants to kick in. Okay, so this is how we activate it. It looks like he's looking over my shoulder. Okay, that's kind of funny. Anyways, squirrel. Okay, so for this next one, typically when we breathe, right, we take a deep breath in and our tummy goes in, and we blow our breath out, and then our bellies go out, okay? We're going to do the opposite. When you take a deep breath in, and put a hand on your belly so that you can feel the movement. When you take a deep breath in, push your belly out. It's a very strange feeling. And as you release your breath and blow out, bring your belly in. Okay, we're going to do that again. It's tough. It's weird. If you've never done that before, it's like patting your belly and scratching your head or whatever at the same time. All right, so deep breath in, push your belly out. And you can exaggerate the movement. And then blow the breath out, pull the belly button in. Okay, and when I mean pull your belly button in, it's as if you're pulling your belly button towards your spine. And I'll see if I can't, so you guys can see the sideways, okay? Deep breath in, pull, and blow the breath out. And then hold that for a count of 5. I'm actually sweating a little bit. I need to work on mine. Okay. So I like doing this exercise. There's 2 ways of really doing that foundational transverse abdominal exercise: in sitting, and then there's one lying down. And the reason why I like to do this one first is because it lets you just focus on doing that one muscle, on really focusing on that. Okay. So if you're looking for a way to start really kind of fine-tuning your gait, activating that core, okay, this is the exercise you want to start with. And I'll do it one more time, okay? Deep breath in, push belly out. And then blow the breath out and pull the belly in. And then hold that for a count of 5. And then slowly release the contraction, okay? Usually I tell people when they wake up in the morning and they sit at the side of their bed, just do 10 of these. Just start activating that core. All right. Lots and lots and lots of comments. Let me see what these guys are saying. Let me see what y'all are saying. Whee. Okay. Aha. Karen. Very popular question. How many ply socks can you use before you need a new prosthetic socket? Cozy Poll, I want to see answers in here. Guys, tell me the number of ply that you guys can get up to before you start feeling uncomfortable in your socket. Put that number in there. Put your number in there. Okay. So Karen, textbook answer will tell you when you reach 15 ply, it's time to get a new socket. That's the textbook answer. That being said, my answer is when you start to lose connection with your socket, okay? When you start to lose that feeling of proprioception, that you know where your socket feels and you know what it feels like and where it is in space. For some of my patients, I have some patients who are very sensitive to their fit, and by the time they reach 8 ply, they're going bonkers, okay? And they feel like they can't walk well, they're losing their balance, and they lose that connection with the socket. On the other hand, I have some people who have the 15 ply and they're doing just fine. They have no problems, no issues, okay? So in that case, I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're at 15 ply, you're comfortable, you're walking in your socket just fine, keep it going. If you're at 8 ply or 9 ply or 10 ply and you're starting to have issues, that's the time to start talking to your prosthetist about possibly getting fit for a new socket, okay? Especially in that first year, guys, when you go through more than one socket, okay? Jody says, I just got a custom liner and it fits like a glove. Let's see. Good heavens. Oh, here are the answers. Here we go. Okay, so Steven says 5. Leanne says 15. Angie can go up to 6. Liz says 13. Daryl says 10. Daniel says 8. I've been to 26. But holy smokes. And then Kevin says nothing over 10, just don't like it. Mark says 10. Diana 7 to 8. Glenda 15. So as you guys can see, it's kind of all over the place. It's all over the place. I do, and again, this is not based on any official studies. This is just me making observations in my clinic over the years. I've noticed that the people who are the best walkers and my runners, they can't stand having a lot of ply. Like they are very, very sensitive to that. And that's something that I know to look for. All right, let me scroll back up here and see what other questions just came in. Okay, K Black says, I'm a year out, hated being scared about more infection and thinking that it would be better for healing to let it breathe. Anyhow, I was not listening, but I had several infections. And again, Kay, everybody's a little bit different. If you find that you have the kind of sensitive skin that it needs time to breathe at night, and that's a very, very real thing, then by all means, protect your skin at all costs. Like for me, the priority is keeping that skin healthy. Ashley says, steal away better than an ice pack than a bag of frozen peas. I like the frozen peas though, Ashley. I'm kind of old school in that regard. Steven says, hi, Bob. It's a little creepy seeing that he's like right over my shoulder there. It's kind of funny. All right, hang on. Sorry, guys. Like with this particular software, the comments are like jumping up and down. So I'm trying to keep up with it. Tom says, tighter by running a stitch down the side of them with our sewing machine adds life to my old shrinkers. And that's actually a hack. I remember that. Thank you for reminding me of that, Tom. Back when I worked at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, and we were so lucky to have the prosthetics in the lab down the hallway. Definitely for some of my patients, especially if they didn't have insurance, we would try to get as much life out of those shrinkers as possible, and they would run a seam down the shrinker just to get a little bit more life out of that. So definitely. And the prosthetists in their offices, they have these really industrial strength sewing machines that can handle sewing those shrinkers. Kay says, 5 ply already makes me feel uncomfortable. Going down steps, my socket will shift. I like it nice and tight. There you go. Charles says 10 ply up to the magic number 15. Ashley says, when I get to a 10, I'm uncomfortable. When I get to 12, my prosthetist is talking to my PM&R about a new socket. Yep. And Daniel says, my daily leg and running leg, I'm lucky to use no ply with that after 5 years. And again, for my athletes, they might find, I see both sides with my athletes. I have some athletes that are heavy sweaters. So they're sweating, especially this Florida weather. They're sweating and their limb will change, as much as 3 ply after one run, just because of the amount of sweat that they lose. But then in their daily walking, because they have a healthy lifestyle and they keep everything nice and balanced, their residual volume can stay nice and balanced as well. All right, moving along. Here's the big question of the evening. Bonnie asked, what is the difference between RPNI and TMR? The surgeon has suggested an RPNI procedure when they take both legs above the knee secondary to CRPS. Okay, so let's review this just briefly, okay? And this is something that I'm hoping a little bit further in the year to be able to explain and go into more detail. So we've done a show here. It was actually done a couple of months back on TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, okay? And what Bonnie was asking about is RPNI, regenerative peripheral nerve interface, okay? And the two procedures are very, very, very similar. So we're just going to briefly touch upon both. And again, like I said, hopefully later on this year, I'll be able to bring back Dr. Dedesi. He was the orthopedic surgeon who came on the show a few months back to talk to us about TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, okay? So just as a quick review, when an amputation is performed, okay, the surgeon will take the nerve, kind of gently tease it out of the soft tissue, clip it, and then release it back into the soft tissue, kind of burying it in there. So it kind of has like a little bit of a rebound effect, right? So in some cases, what will happen is the nerve in its healing process, it kind of tries to send out little sproutlets and try to regenerate on its own, but it can sometimes get tangled up in itself and scar tissue, and you have yourself a neuroma, which can cause a lot of pain. Any of you here, y'all don't mind, kind of saying, yep, I've had a neuroma, can attest to the fact that it can be pretty painful to have some of these neuromas, and they can just be a royal pain and interfere with function, interfere with prosthesis. So TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, is a procedure that I believe started like 20 years ago, okay? And basically what it's doing is, instead of just letting the nerve flip-flop around in that soft tissue, it's taking the end of the nerve and plugging it back into the muscle, specifically at certain motor points, right? The goal is that if you're plugging the nerve back into the muscle, it's going to be a happy camper because it's going to have a job to do now. Y'all remember that old expression, idle hands make devil's work, right? So when you got a nerve that's kind of floating around that soft tissue and it's got nothing to do, it's going to cause trouble. If you plug it back into the muscle, okay, hopefully it will not cause any trouble and it'll start to reinnervate that muscle, okay? A little bit more, a little more complicated than that, but that's kind of the basic gist of it. And also, especially now with our upper extremity, all this beautiful technology coming out with upper extremity, they do the TMR procedure kind of to rewire the upper extremity. So the remaining nerves that are there, they're put into very specific locations, and that kind of helps power the prosthesis. Super cool. And again, want to go into that more later on this year. Now, RPNI procedure, regenerative peripheral nerve interface. Very similar, okay, in the sense of the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to help resolve a neuroma and to also help provide that interface for those bionic devices, right? But the way it works is, my understanding is they take a little muscle graft. So they take a little piece of muscle, they wrap it around the end of that nerve. And that's how they try to get that nerve to behave itself and reinnervate a different part, okay? So that's kind of like the basic difference between the two. Now, why do they use one compared to the other? That's something that I personally want to learn more about. And hopefully Dr. Dedesi is going to be able to share that with us a little bit later on this year. I have read a couple of studies where they actually do both procedures, where on the same individuals, to give them the max amount of possibility of resolving that neuroma. So again, something I want to learn a little bit more about. But again, this is something that you guys can also ask your surgeons, especially those of you who are dealing with neuromas and possibly looking at having to do a revision or a resection of that neuroma. These are two procedures that you want to ask your surgeon about. And there's not too many surgeons out there that do these procedures, but those that do them have seen some pretty good success with it. All right, hang on, here we go. Kay says, so good to hear all the other callers. This is an incredible resource. Thank you, Kay. And guys, it's a good resource because you guys make it a good resource. I mean, honestly, I'd be sitting here talking to myself and Bob all night if you guys weren't here with me. So thank you guys, for those of you who have been with me some of you have been with me for the 2 years that I've been doing this show. And some of you are newcomers. So I appreciate all of you. And thank you. So we've got Junebug that says, I've never used a socket. It will be 9 years in May. I'm very active. Very good. And folks, I see that. I don't see too many people on the show saying that, but there's a lot of people out there that are very functional without the use of a socket. All right, Kay says, in general, do you like an AK using a liner and socket or going skin to socket? It's time for a new socket for me, and I've been curious. I just hate how sweaty I get, even with the liquid to powder. And Kay, I totally understand that. The skin to socket fit, I'll be honest, Kay, I haven't seen that in a long time. In a long time. I used to see it a lot more in the beginning of my career, but now I don't see it as often. And a big part of that is because to do a skin to socket fit, I mean, that thing's got to fit perfectly. And especially if you want it to be comfortable. So with the creation of these liners, these gel liners, these silicone liners, polyurethane liners, it gives a little cheat room there for the socket. So if there's just a millimeter off in the socket, that liner is going to provide that buffer and that protection there. Actually, the only person I know of right now that does a skin to socket is Greg Menino. He's a prosthetist. He's an above the knee amputee himself. He's also a 22-time Paralympian and Olympic skier. The guy's a total badass. And he's been on the show more than once. I say that on, oops, I should have said that. So he's been on the show more than once himself, and he has that skin to socket fit as well. And he loves it. He's an extremely active individual, extremely active, lots of hiking, lots of high impact activities. So Kay, that might be somebody I might put you in touch with to kind of learn a little bit more. So Kay, after the show is over, contact me, send me a little nudge and remind me to make that connection for you. As far as what I prefer whatever's comfortable for my patient. Okay. If you have a very skilled prosthetist and one who has experience making these skin to sockets fits, then, and you want to try it out, have that conversation with your prosthetist. Have that conversation. You might have a prosthetist who says, you know what, I really don't have as much experience making those sockets, but I can make you an extremely comfortable traditional suction socket with a liner. Okay. So ask your prosthetist, have that conversation. And as far as the sweat, I mean, that's definitely a huge issue. And it's not to say that with skin to socket, you're not going to have sweat issues. Okay. Greg, the same gentleman I was just referring to, he's actually, he and I work together a lot, and we consult with Vital Fit Skincare Company, and he loves their products. And for him, having the skin to socket was actually a little bit tough on his skin. So the products helped with that. So something also to think about, Kay. Let's see. I got some more comments. Okay. Rebecca says, I'm a bilateral below the knee amputee and had revision. They performed TMR surgery on my right leg in November, and it feels like bubbles in my leg sometimes. Do you know why that would happen or what it can be? I'm actually getting my left leg done Friday. Rebecca, I don't think I've ever heard that particular description of bubbles in the leg. So I'd be curious, have you mentioned this to your surgeon, and what did they have to say about that? I'm kind of curious about that. Oh, Stephen, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And guys, I worked in some of the top hospitals in the world, in Miami, specifically Jackson Memorial Hospital. And what I would notice with my patients when I would walk in their rooms, especially a few days after their amputation, and I would be explaining things to them, and they would say to me, nobody's explained that to me before, and it's kind of, to me, sometimes it was true. Sometimes nobody had taken the time to explain a particular concept, but more often than not, what I would notice is when you are in the middle of a health crisis like that, and you are being bombarded with so much information, so many different facets of your recovery, it's kind of hard to absorb everything. And I think repetition is something that you need in this process. I have patients, now that I work in outpatient, and I explain some of the things to my patients, and they'll say, I don't remember ever hearing that. And I go, you know what? You probably did hear it at some point in your recovery process, but with everything going on, and this is all new information to you, some of that information just kind of didn't stick around. Okay. And again, one of the many reasons I do this show is sometimes we just need to hear things more than once in order for them to stick. Often you guys have probably noticed, who have watched the show more than a few times, you've noticed that I've done, for example, the prosthetic feet talk. And I've done that on more than one occasion because I feel like every time you listen to it, you can get something new out of it. I know I do. I get something new whenever I do the prosthetic foot talk, and I'll learn something new on my own. Let's see. Okay, Junebug, that makes a little more sense to me. Thank you for clarifying that. So Ashley asked, speaking of liners, my long overdue random question. Yes, ma'am. Do they make liners out of neoprene? Okay, so no. Do they make neoprene sleeves? Yes, but that's not the same thing as a liner. Okay, so usually where I see the neoprene sleeve is when I have an individual who needs extra support with their suspension. Specifically, I see it with my runners. And the neoprene sleeve, it goes over the socket and over everything. Let me see if I can clarify that. When you're wearing a neoprene sleeve, if you're a runner, right, and you want to make sure that leg is going to stay on and it's not going anywhere, you put on your regular liner. You put on your socks, you put on your socket. Then you take the neoprene sleeve and you put it on top of everything, kind of like a sausage casing. That's typically where I see these neoprene sleeves being used, Ashley. And in my above the knee runners, they have the belt that goes around their waist because that helps control the rotation and prevent that from happening. Jeff Cook says Dream Team Prosthetics in Oklahoma do a lot of skin fit sockets. So, okay, that might be something you want to check out. Let's see. Have I ever thought of doing a Zoom session? It could be fun. I've thought about it, Stephen. It's just a little tough just because I have so many viewers nowadays that to keep everybody on the Zoom, it would be a bit of a challenge. But I thought about it. And there are times where I've done Zoom talks with amputee support groups. And also through working with some of the sponsors that I've worked with, doing Zoom talks that way when it's a bit of a smaller audience and I'm able to interact. I enjoy it because it allows me to see people's faces and interact with them. And I really enjoy that aspect. Unfortunately, for the purposes of what I do on Wednesday night, it's a little tough to be able to maneuver that. So yeah, I thought about it. Let's see. Rebecca says it's at the bottom of my limb, not at the incision. She didn't say much about it. I'm going to mention it to her again on Friday. Rebecca, since you mentioned it's at the bottom of your limb, even though it's not on the incision, if you have a little scar tissue formation, okay, and the fascia is also scarred down. So just I don't have anything I can kind of, okay. Anyways, so your fascia, it's like that thin, super paper thin layer that lies on top of your muscle, okay? Think about when you're eating like a chicken leg, right? It's got a little bit of that thin, very thin tissue membrane. That's your fascia. So if that gets scarred down a little bit, it feels almost like Rice Krispie treats. So for example, if I have somebody, I had one patient once that he had elbow surgery and he had some of that myofascial kind of scarred down, tied down on this part of his arm. And I'm loosening it up with, some of the thumb techniques and manual techniques. And under my thumb, it feels like I'm rubbing like Rice Krispie treats, that crackling sensation. So if it's kind of like that bubbly crackling sensation, it could be that you're rubbing up a little bit on scar tissue. Something to think about. It could be that. Jeff says hard to absorb having below the knee amputation in 6 weeks, trying to learn all I can. Jeff, hopefully you'll be able to connect with other Facebook groups as well. We have some fantastic support groups on Facebook that are run by some really great admins. And obviously on the show, you are more than welcome to ask any questions that you may have. Oh, Daniel perfectly said. He says, Jeff, ask all the questions you can remember. And there is no dumb question unless you have on that you don't ask and seek an answer for. There you go. Kay says, Jeff, things will all gel together once your BK happens. Sorry to hear about your surgery. I'm 2 years out as an AK. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you, Kay. Thank you. All right, let's see. Okay, so we're coming up on, boy, I've only taken 2 sips. All right, Daniel says, I was recommended vitamin E oil for my scar line. What's your thought on that? That's an old remedy. I used to use vitamin E oil on my patients for the scar line. Nowadays, I feel like we have so many options out there when it comes to treating scars. One of my colleagues, Heather, she's the wound care, we call her the wound care lady. She's really great at managing scars. There's so many techniques. I've seen lasers for helping with scars. Vitamin E oil is another one. Moderna, is that the name? Moderna or Mederma? It's a little over-the-counter cream that can be put onto the scar to help lighten the scar a little bit. I know that when I have someone come in who is relatively fresh out of their surgery, once their incision has completely healed, I'll start digging in there with my thumb to make sure we don't get any scar tissue and try to loosen up that as much as possible. And I teach my patients to do that as well, to loosen up that scar and get it as mobile as possible. This is the case also if you find that you have a scar that has been a problem, a scar that's become adhered or hypertrophic, meaning it's bubbling up, okay, or keloid, where it's bubbling up and spreading out on the outside part of your skin. This is where the assistance of a dermatologist can really help out. They have all sorts of fun, neat toys to help manage some of these scar tissues and help kind of get it a little bit more mobile. Some folks, especially with my below the knee amputees, if they have a scar that's really stuck on there, it can be a problem when they put their socket on because the scar just sticks and it won't move with the person. So you can create a lot of friction there and a lot of potential for skin breakdown. But yeah, vitamin E, I think as long as it doesn't cause any kind of reaction. I have had the occasional person where they'll put vitamin E on their skin with the vitamin E oil, the little capsules, and just put it on their skin, and their skin just kind of breaks out a little bit and doesn't like it. So we just try something different. Sounds good. All right, Jeff is asking, how long were you in the hospital after surgery? So Jeff, a lot of that will depend upon what your medical condition is right now. Typically, surgeons like to send patients home as soon as is safely possible because that way they can avoid picking up an infection at the hospital, okay? And the more a person is home, a little bit faster on the healing. So once they declare you to be medically stable, if you don't have any other medical conditions that they're concerned about, diabetes, any heart conditions, okay, then they look to see at how the wound is healing. If the wound healing is looking good and you're up and moving out of bed, then they might send you home or they might send you to inpatient rehab. If they feel like you need a little bit more help in learning how to get around with the walker or with crutches, then they might send you for a few days to the inpatient rehab. Or if they feel like, and hopefully you should be seeing a physical therapist during this time, Jeff. If not, raise your hand and ask to see the physical therapist. Okay, don't forget that part. So Jeff, hopefully you'll be working with this physical therapist and they're going to help you and teach you how to move around. And if they feel like you are safe enough to move around in your home, get to the bathroom, get out of bed, do the basics, then they'll send you home and hopefully also send you home with home health physical therapy. Okay, so Jeff, that's the physical therapy side that I'm going to plug in there for you. And everybody, and Daniel's absolutely right. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people in just a couple of days, they're up, out, and back home. Other people, if they are having problems with pain management, if they're having problems with an infection of some sort, or if there's any problems with the wound, they might stay a little bit longer, okay? Chris says, I use vitamin E lotion every night in almost 2 years, and my scar line is almost gone. There you go. And I will say this, when it comes to scars, your genetics play a huge role. And I learned this a lot when I was working in the burn trauma unit many years ago, that a lot of it depends upon your genetics. There are certain ethnicities that are more prone to scarring, more prone to hypertrophic and keloid scarring compared to other ethnicities. And usually I would tell people, okay, how do you scar? Because people will say, well, how is the scar going to look like when it finishes healing? And I tell them, okay, look at some of your childhood scars or some scars that you may have recently had on other parts of your body. And that's kind of a good indication as to how your body is going to heal. And we can kind of sort of try to predict that and see how to manage it. All right. So Stephen says 1 week in the hospital, 3 weeks in rehab. Okay. Denise says 10 days in the hospital with an infection. and 3.5 weeks in rehab. Okay. So Jeff, the important thing is when you're doing this, especially when you've got a lot of things to consider, rely upon your team. Okay, Jeff, when you go in for this surgery, the members of your team in the hospital that you really need to be in touch with, obviously your surgeon. Typically, most surgeons will have a nurse practitioner who is their right-hand man or woman, and they are going to be the ones coordinating your care when you're in the hospital. The social worker, oh my gosh, these people are angels. They're angels on earth without wings. You can't see their wings. Social workers are so incredibly valuable when you're in the hospital setting and outside too, but especially in the hospital, because they're going to be the ones helping coordinate a lot of these services that you may need. Okay. And Jeff, the other person, the physical therapist and occupational therapist. Okay. Ask them all the information. These are going to be the folks that are going to help get you up, get you around, start getting you acclimated to your new body. Okay. And they're the ones who are also going to be making recommendations for either sending you possibly to inpatient rehab or sending you home to home health PT, OT services. Okay. Thank you very much, Johnny V. I'm so glad you stuck around for it. All right, guys. I think we're going to wrap up. Oh my gosh. Wait, guys. Stay with me. Don't sign off yet. Don't sign off yet. Stay with me. Guys, stay with me, please. I know this looks so funny right now. Copy here. All right, guys, check out this link. Okay, so this link I just posted, guys, don't go anywhere yet. This link I just posted. This year, I've had the absolute pleasure of getting to know Joan McDonald. She is a lovely, lovely lady who lives in Canada. And she is the owner and creator of Socket Socks. And you guys have heard she's been on my show talking about her beautiful product, her beautiful designs for Socket Socks. She has created, an amputee guide. And it's really nicely done. And I just posted the link for you to be able to sign up and get this amputee guide. So Jeff, this is what kind of came to my head, especially for someone like yourself. And even those of you who are veteran amputees, this is a really nicely put together guide. And it's helping support a small business owner in the limb loss community. Joan herself is also an amputee, and she's done really beautiful things with her work. So guys, if you have a chance, please, after the show is over, click on this link, sign up so that you can get that amputee guide. Really, really great information that she's put into there. Let's see. Leanne says, Kosi, as a therapist, can you share some of the things patients forget to share with their therapist? Yes. And again, when I worked back in the days that I worked in the hospital, I tried my best to remember to ask patients as much as I could, because I know so many things are flying out of their head. But some things you want to express to your therapist when you're in the hospital is, what does your home look like? Okay. I would ask my patients, do they live in a trailer home? Do they live in an apartment setting with elevator or no elevator? Are they on the first, second, third, whatever floor? Do they live in a single family home? Are there steps at the entrance? Okay. When they're inside of their home, are there any steps within the home? What does their path look like to get to their bathroom and to their bedroom? What does their bedroom look like? Okay, so guys, as much description as you can give your therapist about what your home setting looks like, it can really help us focus on what we need to work on in the hospital to get you home safely. And this was one of my woohoo moments as a young therapist where, my patient said, yep, I live on the third floor of an apartment. Awesome. So we're working with this patient. It never occurred to me to ask my patient if she had an elevator access, and it never occurred to the patient to tell me she didn't have an elevator. I just assumed third floor apartment, you're going to have an elevator. So we found out maybe a day or two before she was being discharged home. It came up in conversation, and I realized, oh dear, I've got to teach her how to get up 3 flights of stairs on a fresh amputation. In that case, it was calling the social worker in and making temporary arrangements for her to stay at another place while she got strong enough until she could go up those 3 flights of stairs. So if I have to say anything, if there's one thing that you really want to disclose to your therapist when you're in the hospital setting, is Tell them as much as you can about your home setting. What is it that you're going home to that they need to teach you how to maneuver? Okay, this also includes shower versus bathtub for the OTs. Okay. See, it's never just one thing I'm going to say there. You know that. Oh, good, good. I'm so glad you guys got that. Yes, we love the socket socks. Awesome. Okay, good, guys. We've got it. Awesome. Yes, and Rhonda, especially if you go home and you have access to the home health physical therapist, and I worked home health as well for men. Man, I've worked everywhere. I've been around these 18 years. So anyways, when I worked in the home health setting, first thing I did is I would tell the wife or the husband, okay, take me on the tour of the house. Let's see what we got to work with and what we need to modify and how can we fix things to make your home accessible as much as possible. All right, guys. I am talked out tonight. That says a lot because I can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but I'm going to go ahead and sign off for this evening. Guys, as always, I am trying to kind of shamelessly drum up business on my social media platforms. So if you're not already following me on Instagram, please consider doing so and having a visit to my YouTube channel. As you can see, I was doing some filming this past week. I was kind of putting that up there, and I will be posting a lot of new things to the YouTube channel. So if you haven't already done so, please think about subscribing to the YouTube channel. And I'm just going to leave you guys with this one last video that I did with my patient this week. He was such a good sport about it. I'm trying to kind of do more patient videos just so you guys can take a sneak peek at what I'm doing in the clinic and maybe get a little hack here and there. So here's one of my little low technology hacks if you're having any trouble standing up from your chair or wheelchair. Check out that link that I just posted. All right, guys, I will see you guys same bat time, same bat channel next week. And have a great and blessed week. Jeff, please, best of luck to you in your surgery. And please let me know if you have any questions. God bless, guys.